but emphasizing the importance of providing the subject matter parameters of reportage to be pursued for this new venue by first defining the key grand challenge or tectonic drivers of the future naturally begs the question of how best to choose and what those category selections might be. While I personally have many ideas and biases for such category selections because of many years of independent research interest in the study of complex systems, the main objective here is to serve the broader open and collaborative spirit envisioned for the intended modus operandi of the imperative report by initially seeking input, mutual evaluation, and consideration of candidate categories from prospective participants and audience members before fixing those into actual venue channels via YouTube, Vimeo, Google+, Facebook, etc. That said, recent years have seen increasingly serious attention given to defining criteria for and applying interdisciplinary research toward addressing what are frequently referred to as the quote-unquote grand challenges confronting the world, many of which might be taken directly as proxies for what I am referring to as the tectonic driver categories. But there may be no better basis for starting to define these than consideration of the planetary boundaries construct, effectively a kind of meta-category. At least three reasons immediately come to mind to justify making these boundaries central for this purpose. Number one, because staying within these boundaries so clearly is an imperative, perhaps the overarching imperative of this global transformation. Two, because the many, many processes, social, economic, political, technological, and overtly ecological, entailed for remaining within these boundaries is almost the ideal prototype of a complex system's governance and management challenge, and therefore rife with opportunity for sustained, inquiring, cross and transdisciplinary informed reportage regarding what is happening or what needs to happen in the many areas of activism pertinent to these processes and to remaining within these boundaries. And three, because they provide a further intimation of just how thematically rich the cross-disciplinary reportage within the imperative report might be. But there is a challenge. Since the 9 boundaries explicitly cited in the Planetary Boundaries Initiative are at a fairly high level of biophysical and ecological abstraction, actually defining how these can be made the basis for sustained reportage seems a non-trivial challenge. One way to do so would be to cite existing examples of initiatives which would be complementary with A, the objective of moving us toward globally living within these boundaries, and B, those having precisely the complex, interpenetrating nature which affords great opportunity for and even demands the kind of rich, layered, and sustained reportage that the imperative report is conceived to provide. Specifying just 2 of the many that might be cited should be helpful. The first, under the auspices of the United Nations, are known as the Sustainability Goals and the associated UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network. The second, initiated by renowned Harvard professor Michael Porter, is called the Social Progress Imperative, which leverages their Social Progress Index in an effort to define status and progress metrics. Another way to do so would be to reframe the imperative by casting it in the form of a question. For example, what are the key factors which are driving us to transgress these boundaries? When we do this, opportunities abound for how to thematically take reportage beyond the often ludicrously short-sighted, if not trivial or irrelevant, topicality so characteristic of the Twitter-frenzied conventional media. Again, just a few examples may help give a sense of the richness of the opportunity. In the excellent and important 2006 book by Professor Thomas Homer Dixon, entitled The Upside of Down, Catastrophe, Creativity, and the Renewal of Civilization, he explicitly enumerates, quote, 5 tectonic stresses, unquote, centered around population, energy, environment, climate and economic instability, and maldistribution of wealth. The author then adds 2 factors which he refers to as quote-unquote multipliers. Quote, the first multiplier is the rising speed and global connectivity of our activities, technologies, and societies. The second is the escalating power of small groups to destroy things and people. Drilling down into these a bit further could easily lead us to an incredibly rich array of highly viable subject candidates of great relevance to the Planetary Boundaries meta frame. A very brief and partial, literally tip of the iceberg sampling might include the work of Professor Pavan Sukhdev and the Economics of Ecosystems and Biodiversity, or the acronym being TEEB, initiative which he founded, and the vast and growing discipline of ecosystem services analysis and policy consultation at local, regional, national, and global levels. There is the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's work to promote and instantiate the circular economy that I briefly alluded to previously, with a wide and growing array of business and NGO partners. There is the work of Carl Folke and Professor John Rockstrom at the Stockholm Resilience Center directly related to the Planetary Boundaries Initiative. There is the tireless and inspired work of Professor Jeffrey Sachs and the Earth Institute at Columbia University. There is the national and global consultative work of Amory Lovins and the Rocky Mountain Institute, previously cited. The work of renowned Harvard professor Michael Porter, just cited a moment ago, and the Social Progress Imperative and Index. There is the World Economic Forum Systems Initiatives, and far too many more to cite here. But what they all share in common is that the planetary boundaries significance of the work of any one of them would justify sustained coverage and reportage, either with respect to what they are accomplishing, what policy or institutional factors might be obstructing their more rapid progress, what the opportunities for synergy among them might be, whether and to what extent these have been explored, are they leveraging to the best social, economic, and technological damping or reinforcing feedback networks within which they are embedded, etc. The National Intelligence Council report, Global Trends 2030, provides another source of candidate tectonic categories, quote unquote. The thematic breakdown of these is priority tiered, with the top tier being megatrends. These are designated as individual empowerment, diffusion of power, demographic patterns in food, water, and energy nexus. The next tier is game changers, designated as the crisis-prone global economy, governance gap, potential for increased conflict, wider scope of regional instability, impact of new technologies, and role of the United States, and finally the potential worlds tier, including stalled engines, fusion, genie out of the bottle, and non-state world, even making allowances for the relatively parochial U.S. national security filter. Motivating the report overall, numerous of these subsections are rich in their relevance and resonance with cross-disciplinary implications for planetary boundaries. In his book, The Price of Civilization, Professor Jeffrey Sachs of Columbia University and the Earth Institute, cited a moment ago, similarly enumerates 4 broad categories which he considers decisive for the renewal of America, which might be viable tectonic driver candidates as well. In his 2 recent books, The Third Industrial Revolution, How Lateral Power is Transforming Energy, the Economy, and the World, followed by The Zero Marginal Cost Society, the Internet of Things, the Collaborative Commons, and the Eclipse of Capitalism, Jeremy Rifkin enumerates a range of broad driving categories, or pillars, unquote, quote unquote, as he refers to them, of what he deems the third industrial revolution, all of which might legitimately fall within the purview of and be complementary with select categories cited by Professors Homer Dixon and Sachs. In the previously cited book, Reinventing Fire, energy efficiency expert and consultant Amory Lovins emphasizes the often profound implications of design solutions which are integrative, emphasizing the initially counterintuitive notion that finding good solutions to a given problem often entails actually enlarging the problem domain, being considered beyond the boundaries of what may seem to be its most immediate definition. This very important idea of finding areas of broader synergy to achieve optimal solutions for more targeted subproblems is an operational execution of the idea of multi- or transdisciplinary solutions to a wide range of social, economic, ecological, and related challenges, precisely because these generally are interlinked in ways which entail that solutions taken for any one of them in isolation, but which ignores these linkages, is likely to aggravate the other areas in ways which will feed back to undermine the efficacy of the solution originally designed and intended for the more narrowly defined problem. This is a classic example of the silo challenge, and it is a huge problem in many domains, not least in governance, and even media itself. But correcting this oversight is also an equally enormous opportunity, and one which the Imperative Report is explicitly designed to leverage. To be continued.